Good morning, everybody. This is Grant from State of the Spark, and I am so pumped for today's show because I get to tell you the story of a $100 million millionaire, centimillionaire, artist, Holocaust survivor, and why he actually passed away in squalor while still being a millionaire. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about other news. We're going to be talking about what we're grateful for. We're going to be talking about, where are we at here? Where's my thingy? There it is. How wood is sharper than knife. But before all of that, you know we're going to be covering a morning cup of gratitude. In the comments, tell me this morning. Good morning, Janae. Thanks for liking the show. I want to hear from you in the comments what you are stinking grateful for this week. What went right this week? Oh, yeah, I'm sure some things went wrong. But what are you pumped about this week? I'll start. I'm super grateful for a very productive week. We had a busy week. We had a site go live. We had a little bit of a hiccup, but the site had been live except for some small circumstances. So we were happy to knock that out, take the site live. Had a very productive week with the team, but I'm also grateful for running into great people this week. We ran into awesome people this week. Me and Marissa really needed a connection week, a people week, and we got that. We connected with a ton of people. Good morning, Assad. I hope you're doing fantastic. So we met a lot of great people, and the people in our Discord, oh my gosh, the people in our Discord and our Patreon, they have helped so much with some crypto trading. We made huge strides in our crypto lending, getting 25% and 60% on my crypto lending. We doubled down on that. Now we're staking our Cardano. So things are moving the right direction. That's what I'm grateful for. What are you grateful for this morning? What's keeping you excited? What's keeping you pumped? What are you looking forward to going into this weekend? Listen, express some gratitude, please. Let's talk about other news. Yes, cosmopolitan news that makes you more smart, more intelligent, more interesting than the normal conversation stuff. You know, everyone's in the news right now, and we could probably pick the top 2 or 3. If I just said, okay, tell me the top 2 or 3 headlines, you'd be like, that's the news. But we're going to do something a little bit differently. We're going to talk about how scientists have made wood sharper than steel. Let's talk about it. Like a hot knife through butter, scientists have recently been able to create a wooden knife that is sharpened, sharper than hardened steel, 3 times sharper, in fact, than hardened steel, and keeps its edge. One of the researchers on this said, in our kitchen, we have many wood pieces that we use for a very long time, such as a cutting board, chopsticks, or rolling pins. These knives, too, can be used many times if you resurface them, sharpen them, and perform the same regular upkeep. Now, this was, yes, a group of researchers out of University of Maryland, I believe. And so they invented a 2-step method, just 2 steps, to creating wood knives that are sharper than steel, that stay sharper than steel. So in short, they have increased the wooden blade's hardness. Think about this. They've increased the wooden blade's hardness by 23%. You see, the advantage that steel knives have over wood knives, of many advantages, one of them is that they're just denser, which means in the sharpening process, they can go more aggressive in the sharpening process. So wood needs to first be hardened a bit more before we can even think about sharpening it. So they've been able to actually increase the blade's hardness by 23-fold, or that's 2,300% hardness increase. And then the second point is they've maintained a higher level of cellulose. Yes, cellulose, kind of like cellulite, like the fat in my body. Typically, wood contains only about 50% cellulose, and I'd love to learn more about how that actually works. But if they can increase the amount of cellulose and increase the hardness, they can actually get that edge going really well. And they say it's as simple as coating the wood in mineral oil helps protect its sharpness during use and washing. Now, we kind of know this, but we don't often think about wood. When we think about utensils in the house, we think about metal utensils because it just makes sense. But they're working on this process, including making wooden nails that are sharper than steel nails. Now, can they handle the impact of a hammer? I don't know. That's the density. Density is different than sharpness. But they are looking into this to find low cost, renewable alternatives to tools and supplies. Now, how would a nail work? I just can't imagine that a nail would work, that a wooden nail would work better than a steel nail over time, because we know that these are organic materials and they'll rot. So, how could these actually be used? But we also know that well placed wooden dowels and furniture work for many, many years. So it's interesting research. If you want to read more about how scientists are making a wooden knife that is sharper than steel, boom, there you go. You've got it right there. Let's see here, making sure that that's going through and that's going through. So in the comments, you should see a thumbnail right there of the article and get access to how they're making these freaking knives. Now, I wasn't able to actually see myself. Here, let me drop it here. Boop, boop. I wasn't able to actually see the knife itself, and I'm super intrigued on what this could possibly look like. So we'll check it out. Oh, yeah, they're there. They're cutting the steak right there with it. So that's wild. Let's talk about a Holocaust survivor that never sold a painting in his life, but died a 100 millionaire. Let's talk about it. So today's other news story, and yes, this is a small bit of other news, but it's going to transition into our story for today. You see, Boris Lurie was a survivor of the Holocaust. He died a millionaire but lived in squalor. And Anthony Williams, who is the board of the Boris Lurie Artist Foundation, said he was a complicated man. You see, Boris Lurie, after the Holocaust and after he was liberated from Bucharest, I believe it was, in one of the camps, in 1946, he got out, and that year alone, he created 100 pieces of artwork. And they are on display at the New York's Museum of Jewish Heritage, and they exhibit a beauty and a terror and a horror that you can expect of an artist escaping the Holocaust. Now, a brief history on Boris Lurie. He was born in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and tragically, and it's a little early for tragedy, so we're not going to bring you down with too much tragedy. We're not going to talk too much at all about the horrors of the camps, but he did lose his mother, his grandmother, his sister, and his girlfriend in the Rumbla Forest. I'll let you Google that later when you're feeling a little more cheery. Now, after the war, Boris and his father survived in labor camps, and then they were eventually freed. And he was so grateful that he went to work for the United States Counterintelligence Corp, one of the early arms of the CIA. And as time went on, then he left his service and lived in New York. And he had all this artwork, and he continued to do art, and he was known as an autodidact. But many people knew him as one of the old guard of New York in the in the 40s and 50s. And he lived in squalor. He even described his East Village studio as my New York surrogate Riga ghetto. You see, he was in the ghetto in Riga when the Nazis came. And it was obviously a trauma that stayed with him. But he was, in fact, extremely wealthy. So how did this guy make his money? So of many things, which we'll talk about in the lesson below, but pragmatically, he got into New York City and bought some real estate. He bought some real estate for himself, but eventually this real estate in the Upper West Side became swanky apartments. He owned a piece of that, and then he rolled that into other real estate. Eventually, later in life, he got involved in penny stocks. And he eventually focused his penny stocks on the developing world, still thinking about the poor parts of the world that he came from, and invested in mobile technologies and penny stocks in third world markets. Now, he did this as an old rickety New Yorker with a bagel, a coffee, and an old investor business daily. He wasn't into technology. He wasn't into any of that. He was into investing. And he eventually ended up having an estate worth $100 million. Now, he made it so that he would sleep during the day and work at night. And some of his concerned friends believed that in some ways it was him processing his trauma in the Buchenwald labor camp. And as it was if he was trying to recreate this world because for reasons. Now, I'm going to leave off this story really quick because if you're intrigued on an old guard, rickety Jewish New Yorker who lived in squalor, didn't have a lot of wealth, didn't have a Rolex or expensive suits, wore the same outfit, lived in a ratty Upper East Side studio, went to the same coffee shop every day, had a award-winning art show, and even when he was presented with opportunities to sell his art, he wouldn't. He would actually try to resist selling his art because his art, specifically the show from 1946, and he did additional art shows in the 70s as he recreated some of these situations. They were him processing his trauma, so he would often try to talk buyers out of purchasing his art. So if you want to read more about that before we jump into a story that really stuck with me from Boris Lurie's story, I'm going to put the link right in the comments down there and let you check that out. And you can see the heaviness with which some of his art bears. And I recommend that you really wait till the sun is up, wait till the morning's right, and you got a good cup of coffee before you read his story, because I think as heavy as his story is, to me, it actually holds within it diamonds in the rough of someone processing their trauma, but turning into a life lesson that a samurai agrees with. No, not me. I'm not a samurai. I would never claim that. But a samurai agrees with from the 1700s, his paradigm that I think you could take with you into a very actually inspiring weekend. Let's talk about Boris Lurie's philosophy on living. See, Boris Lurie actually passed in 2009. And even a year after that, people in New York City who are familiar with him were still reeling from his loss. He was a rich character. He was a character of New York. If you can picture New York, I wouldn't want to participate in the life that is New York right now, but I wouldn't mind participating in the life that was New York several decades ago, where there were these really old fixtures. You see, recently I heard it said that the question was posed, why do birds sing in the morning? And I don't know, maybe you've seen this, maybe you heard of this, but I was really struck with the answer. And the answer was simply this: birds sing in the morning, possibly, to let their mates know that they made it through the night and that they're still here. And then, of course, the inspirational thought that follows is maybe that's why we sing. Maybe that's why humans sing, to remind themselves and the people they care about that I made it through the night and I'm still here. If you've got that song that triggers you, I encourage you to put it on this morning. Ask your smart device to put on your favorite song and dance and sing to that song that makes you move. Because you need to remind yourself and the people around you, just like songbirds in the morning, I've made it through the night and I'm still here. Perhaps this is why people are drawn to worship music and concert venues for those who don't even believe in God. This is probably why, at least one reason why, we're drawn to music, to let people we know and people we love and even ourselves that I'm still here. I want to remind you of something from Boris Lurie's life, and it's pretty much this. When are you strongest? You are strongest when you are at your absolute bottom. You are strongest when you are absolutely at your worst. You see, when Boris Lurie came to America, he was at his worst. When Boris Lurie, a Russian born in Leningrad and St. Pete, taken into a labor camp in the 40s, rescued by the forces, the Allies forces, brought to America, served in the CIA, and when he got out, he discovered he was at his worst. He was at his worst because so much of his life had been taken from him. And as I covered, he lost his grandmother, his mother, his girlfriend, his sister, so many people in his life, as many Holocaust survivors did. He was at his worst. And this might be true. And how he processed, as we covered in the story above, is the art. This might be how he processed so much of his trauma. I suspect, though, he also found a huge motivating force. And that huge motivating force came from a line he wrote in his memoir. And I'll share that line with you because this is the line I want to leave with you on a Friday morning going into your inspirational day. It's a powerful line from this person's life. And it means all the more you understand what this person survived, what they did long after they survived, the good they did in the world. I suspect Boris Lurie found a great motivating factor being at his worst. being at bottom. When you are at the bottom of things, I am here to remind you there is nowhere to go but up. That's not his phrase. He had another phrase. You see, the name of the art show for Boris Lurie is not Nowhere to Go But Up. The name of the Boris Lurie art show is Nothing to Do But Try. You see, this man had been through what is probably some of the darkest moments in modern America, in modern human history. And we're not faced with these threats for many people. Many people don't have the fear that a globe consuming force like the Nazis are going to put them in a death camp. We don't have those fears anymore, but we have other existential crises. You know, when you're doing all right, you think, wow, can it get much better than this? Well, no, it feels good and things are going your way. But are you at your strongest? If you can feel that good when you're at your best, how strong can you feel and how strong can you be when you're at your worst? Nothing to do but try. And we don't often resonate with this because I think a lot of us are living mediocre worlds. I think we're leading mediocre lives. We're neutral. Yes, we got to catch up with minimum wage, but you know what? First world problems. Yeah, it's tough to make my cell phone payment, and systemically, that is a challenge for many people to get to work because of a usable vehicle and to pay for their kids to go to the right schools. Very real problems. But from another perspective, first world problems. There are a lot of people who have been through tragedies, especially immigrants from other countries who have seen a lot of challenges. There's a lot of people in America that are really wrestling with poverty. But here was a man, Boris Lurie, who lost his home country, lost the family nearest and dearest to him, lost his future wife, and showed up in America with nothing. And a lot of people could fold up and die. A lot of people could wait for the Democrats to do something in Congress. A lot of people could wait for the Republicans to throw them something. But instead of any of that, Boris Lurie wrote in his memoir, I've got nothing. But that wasn't a depressed thought for him. It was an empowering thought where he stood up tall and said, wait a minute, I've got nothing. And there is nothing to do but try. And that is what he wrote in his memoir, Nothing to Do But Try. I heard a minister say, people seek God or find God in only two ways. People find God, and there's only two ways to find God. Decision or destruction. Now, this minister was talking in their world simply about the Judeo-Christian God, but I like to think of this even broader. This transcendent thing we call the divine infinite intelligence, you can only find this one of two ways. Extremely destruction when you are at your worst. And that's actually easier because the psychological leverage is in your favor that it just can't get worse than this. Nothing to do but try. On the other end is decision. Now, we think of decision as a very passe thing. If I tell you, hey, make a decision, you think, that's not going to do anything. That's because you live in a neutral state. You live in limbo in your mind. You don't have a high gear. You have, or at least it's rusty and out of use. You need to practice being able to make an immovable decision because in our day and age, when we don't have threats of Holocaust nearly as much as we did 100 years ago, 90 years ago, 80 years ago, when our issues are actually really existential issues and first world issues, but we could still go get water at the gym for $10 a month. We could live in our car and be just fine, and no one's putting us in a FEMA camp or a labor camp. Nothing to do but try. In that world, we could become to a form of destruction, but most of us are propped up from really experiencing true total destruction where we decide to go deep in our potentiality, deep in our spirituality, deep in what we could offer the world. Instead, the only other option to most of us is to make an irrevocable decision for greatness, to make an irrevocable decision to do good, to make an irrevocable decision to do more. We have to choose one of these because all the gray area in the middle is a mud, muck, and mire of neutrality, of everything being okay. You can only find God, the divine, through decision or destruction. And I think Boris Lurie knew this, and he was forced to go through destruction. Now, maybe you've had tough times. I know I've had tough times, and we use these as fuel. Have you ever found yourself reflecting on failures and going, "Oh, that's never going to happen again"? And then you find this power to do something extensive, to go make that sale you need to make, to go push through and call that person you should call, to go schedule those appointments you should schedule, to push through because, yeah, I've experienced failure. It's a lot more potent. And I believe this is what Boris Lurie had. Now, a samurai from the 1700s said something quite similar. Samurai from the 1700s opened his entire tome, and you guys know I read the Hagakure by Tsunetomo Matsumuri, I think his name is. I might be getting his name completely wrong. A powerful, powerful book on samurais from the 1700s. And he opens that when you write a book, the opening line is one of the most important lines. And I want you to hear this with me real quick. The most important opening line from the Hagakure is simply this: the way of the samurai is death. Pause. Don't freak out. This isn't nihilism. This isn't kamikaze, rush forward unto death. No, it's not that. It's actually a freeing concept. The way of the samurai is death. You see, they used to do this habit where they would take their very razor sharp. You can imagine how sharp a samurai blade is. We've got one in the house. I love the symbol of the samurai blade. And at night before bed, to make themselves unafraid of death, they would take a small thin thread, and tie their samurai blade to the ceiling so that the point hung down just over their face, and so that at night, falling asleep, they would fall asleep staring at the point of the blade, inoculating their fear of it. The way of the samurai is death, to no longer fear death, to no longer be afraid, not because they want to worship death, but because they have a piece of wisdom, and that is this: the fear that everyone experiences in life, the ultimate fear of snakes, the ultimate fear of success, the ultimate fear of failure, the ultimate fear of I'm just not going to try, the ultimate fear of other people is ultimately an unreconciled fear of death, an unaccepted awareness of death. You need to be very aware of your very finite life. And the samurai, especially with some of their Buddhist teachings behind them, had a very high awareness of death, not to focus on death, but to be unafraid so that they can make the choices they could make after that. Once you have accepted death, as Boris Lurie did, as the samurai do, you look beyond and you ask yourself a question, and that's simply this: nothing to do but try. Try what? Try what? What's big on your heart today? What's the big things you're trying to achieve? What's the goals you just crave and you've gone into a neutral gear? You've taken your car out of first and second gear and thrown it in neutral, and you're just coasting because it's so difficult and the world is so challenging. What is the thing you wish for? What's your dream? What's your dream? I was going to do today's show about fantasizing. We need to remember what it's like to fantasize our dream, to daydream. Go in your head right now and daydream and imagine yourself living the fulfilled life you've been wanting to live. And then ask yourself, what's the real challenge I'm having here? Why am I not overcoming this thing? Why am I not achieving this thing? Oh, well, because I made this decision and that decision and all these decisions that lead you into a mediocre state of neutrality. We don't come to God, divinity, our highest selves, except by decision and destruction. The samurai, the way of the samurai is death. lack of fear of death, and embracing life that's on the other side of getting over your fear of death. Or, as Boris Lurie said, nothing to do but try. I want you to try something big today. I challenge you. Try something big this weekend. Clear your schedule. Make the moves. If there's that one thing even if it's just a hobby and it's not productive and it's solely creative, especially that, I want you to do something big. Tell your spouse, your partners, your kids, your loved ones, hey guys, could you give me an hour and a half? Could you give me 2 hours just to do something big inside of me? Because there's nothing to do but try. There's nothing to do but try. Listen, if you need any help at all, you know to visit us at stateofthespark.com. That's going to be updating even sooner now that we've got our Patreon going. Join our Patreon or our Discord. You can always get the links at any one of our places or in the comments below. Join us for conversations like these on time freedom, financial freedom, mental freedom, but ultimately all of these things so that you live the mission, igniting lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. Have a great weekend.